Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Harvey Oberfeld, a retired but still issue-engaged television reporter. Check out his blog, Keeping It Real, on HarveyOberfeld.ca. Welcome back to the show, Harvey.
Good to talk to you.
Harvey, I know you have a home in Florida. Did it escape the hurricanes?
Yes, it did. It, I had no problems. A few anxious days, but it survived. We have the hurricane shutters, and despite the winds, but we're on the East Coast, so apparently the worst damage was on the West Coast and up the center. So we were okay, and we're not right on the ocean. We're inland also, and that helped us. That was great.
Harvey, taking a look at the John Horgan / Andrew Weaver BC government, how are they doing so far? Any big disappointments?
Well, the biggest disappointment for me, and I don't know why, you'd think after 38 years in the business I wouldn't be so surprised, is that it didn't take them long to be shown to have lied to the voters. And, in particular I'm referring to the electoral reform plan that the NDP came up with. The Greens say it's not really something that they were involved in. But, during the campaign, there was a lot of talk about electoral reform, but John Horgan and the NDP were very, very clear, saying that, yes, the system would change. They would get rid of big donations from unions and corporations and leave it up to individuals to finance the elections and the parties. And he was very explicit that there would be no public taxpayer input into it. Of course, and I've got the quotes right here that he made when he was on CHNL in Kamloops. And sure enough, as soon as, not long after he got elected, he brought in this legislation that would give the parties $28 million over the next 5 years. And that's just an estimate. I wouldn't be surprised if it went higher, of taxpayers' money to sort of bridge them, just bridge, a transitional fund. And I just hate that when politicians say one thing and do something completely the opposite, and then try to spin it after they get caught.
Well, a transitional fund, we know things have to change at one point or another, but did he mention anything about we have to have a bridging fund in there?
No. See, that's the problem. I don't begrudge that, if that was the plan. What bothers me is that they don't say that's what the plan. I mean, when he was on CHNL, he said, what we propose is that Elections BC will look across the country and around the world at the best way to make sure that only individuals are paying for our political process and election process. He said that on air. And then the reporter interviewing him, the host, Shane Woodford, said, just to be clear, there is going to be nothing in there about taxpayers having to fund political parties. Let me just repeat that. There is going to be nothing in there about taxpayers having to fund political parties, ? And Horgan said that is correct. Well, it wasn't correct, because now this transition fund comes in. And they say it's 5 years. It's just a temporary thing. I'm still waiting for them to end the temporary income tax, I've been paying all my life. But it's the thing that bothers me so much is when politicians lie. And, they can sweet talk, say, well, we didn't really mean what we said, they lie. And it bothered me when, remember, read my lips, there will be no price controls. Remember Trudeau, there will be no wage and price controls. Remember Gordon Campbell, there will be no HST. We have no plans for HST. All this kind of thing. And we haven't had any discussions with the federal government over HST. And then they get elected, and right away we see the results. And it just seems that all the parties just have no respect, in my view, for the public and the taxpayers. And they feel they'll get away with it. And, on my blog when I wrote about this, the bigger disappointment, not so much that the politicians lie, because they, should be used to that by now, but all the sycophants, the supporters who would have, cried blue murder had Christy Clark and the Liberals done this, all of a sudden are defending Horgan and the NDP because they happen to be NDP Horgan supporters. And that's what bothers me the most, because our political system will never get better if people continually make excuses for those that they just happen to support on a wide range of issues and let them get away with lying and deceiving and breaking promises so soon after they get elected.
Do we know if these proposed changes to the election system will go to a referendum? Will the people get a chance to say yes or no to it?
No. I think they feel the election was the referendum. And I think they could argue that that was a platform. But, of course, this transitional fund, there's no way they're going to... Now, in a way, it does go to the voters, because they said this transitional fund will be going on for 5 years. Well, let's assume they even get a full term, so they go to the electorate, let's say after 4 years, 4.5 years, whatever. I mean, then you could certainly have a public vote on what they thought of having to shell out, $28 to $30 million to the political parties. Then that sort of would be a referendum, but it certainly wouldn't be, it's not going to be put back to the voters before it's implemented, and before the NDP and the Liberals and the Greens, if they take the money, and I believe they'd be foolish not to, because once it's in there, if you can't deny yourself one source of funding, but then also deny yourself the other source of funding. So there will be no vote, there will be no referendum on it before it gets implemented and before they all start cashing in.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after the break.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the U.S. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the U.S. and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, what did you think of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's performance at the UN?
Well, you used the right word. You called it a performance. And that's what I thought. It was kind of an off-Broadway. I'm not sure if it was a comedy or a tragedy, but it certainly, I thought, was really weak, and it really was an insult to Canada. I called it an attack on Canada, because I've never seen a world leader who especially wants a Security Council seat, standing up there before the General Assembly, and instead of offering Canada's ideas, Canada's proposals, Canada's commitment to perhaps improving the situation in many of the troubled spots of the world, he stood there, and most of his speech he attacked his own country. He attacked Canada's record with the Indigenous people. He attacked Canada's historical failings on many issues. And I can just imagine, the delegates sitting there wondering, well, what has that got to do with, Afghanistan? What does that have to do with Syria? What does that have to do with North Korea? Where are the ideas if he wants to sit on the Security Council? Where is his offer of helping and all that? And I thought it was a disgraceful performance by sort of a photo op selfie politician who was clearly, in my view, out of his depth on the world stage.
Well, I also remember all the photos when he went to a Broadway play with the daughter of Donald Trump. no one asked him any serious questions. They all really do seem to like the photo ops with him.
Well, they love the photo op. He's very good at it. I mean, he's very photogenic, and he's smiling, and but this was an opportunity before. I mean, I'm not a great fan of the UN, especially the General Assembly, and maybe we should be thankful that he spoke on like day 4 or so of the General Assembly session in New York. So there was almost no one there. I mean, no real world leaders were sitting in. Pretty well minor delegates who were assigned to sit there and fill the pews and take notes and things like that. But there was not much to take notes of. If they had any, if they were looking to Canada to see what our ideas, what our commitment would be to solve any of the world problems, there was nothing there other than to say maybe he was trying to suggest, look, we're not perfect either, so therefore we understand that you have problems and we have problems, so let's all work together. But I can assure you that what Trudeau did in saying, well, look at the way we've treated our Indigenous people, look at the way we've had other challenges politically and internally in Canada, I'm sure that didn't do a thing to get, let's say, these wonderful human rights stalwart countries like Saudi Arabia and Syria and Afghanistan and Yemen and Qatar and all these countries, Cuba, Venezuela, I'm sure Russia, China, I mean, there's a whole list. I'm sure not one of them said, oh, well, we better go back and review our policies so that we can come along to reflect what Canada's doing in treating their Indigenous people and our minorities and that sort of thing. It was a totally useless event, speaking more to Canadians, I think, than the world. And if he wanted to speak to Canadians, he could have stayed in Ottawa and done it there.
Has Ottawa made any major moves yet to improve the drinking water issue for Aboriginals? There's hundreds of reserves in Canada that still don't have drinking water 30 years after the problem was pointed out.
Well, you see, that's part of the problem in my view. We spend billions on, how many over the last decades. And, to support people living in poverty in areas, many of which there is not a single hope of having any industry or any real support system or any employment of any real long-term value. And when there are proposals, how often do we see the First Nations themselves saying, not over our ancestral lands, we oppose this, we oppose that. Well, if you want to live in the middle of nowhere, and where there's no industries and anything that props its mind up, possibility up, like something resource-based, and you oppose it, well, what's the solution to that? Pop more billions and billions and billions of dollars in there? If I live there, I mean, most of us, if you study Canadian history, most of us are immigrants that came from places where our ancestors and relatives said, we got to get the hell out of here, it's no good. And we left and we came here. So why would people want to continue to live in areas where there's no hope for long-term employment? They should get out. The Canadian government should assist them to get out, to get jobs in areas where there are jobs, to give them education and train them, and get them out of there. Or the First Nations themselves have to be called on the carpet if they're the ones who are saying there should be no development, that we don't want resources, we don't want anything in our land because, it's going to spoil the waters and all this. Well, okay, then so live in poverty as far as I'm concerned, if that's the thing. But nobody will say that. You certainly won't get the CBC to go up there and say something like that. It's all fawning and, pour more billions in. And then you even wonder, well, does that billions even reach many of the people that are living on these reserves? Or who gets it? Where does it go, But the problem is we prolong this by prolonging the welfare state in those areas, in my view. And if we really love people, you have to find solutions, not just keep paying them to live in poverty and maybe show up and dance at some sort of public ceremony every so often and then send them back to their poverty to live there.
Of course, those reserves were developed in areas where the government at the time thought there wouldn't be any resources for white people to exploit.
Well, at one time there was fur, there was trapping, there was sealing, there were all kinds of things. There was some forestry that went on. And at one point they even didn't seem to mind mining and all that, but all of a sudden we have this new activist bent by a lot of the First Nations who oppose everything and anything. And I'm not so sure whether they really oppose it or it's a shakedown, try to give us millions and billions. But a lot of them are such activists, they don't want anything anywhere. They oppose everything. Not all of them. There are some very progressive First Nations, who do see development and resource development and and royalties as a way to pull themselves out of the poverty that they've suffered under. There are some very progressive ones. But then you've got these others who stand in the way of everything and anything, and their people suffer, and the federal government and the media they don't have the guts to say these people, to call them on the carpet and challenge them on how they are destroying their any chance that their own people will ever get out of poverty and out of living in welfare states.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after this.
I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario. With grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold, a drill program will commence this spring to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork. For more information, visit our website, rmroyalty.com.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, Darryl Plecas being named the Speaker of the BC Legislature. He was a Liberal MLA, and I believe a criminologist from Trinity College in the Fraser Valley. Before that, I've interviewed him. I thought he was a pretty sharp guy. Is he a very sharp guy, and was this a clever move on somebody's part? And if it was, whose move was it?
Well, I think it was a self-interested move. He's a sharp guy, and he's been there for a while. But I think he saw the writing on the wall that this government could hang on for 3 or 4 years. There was nobody in the wings with Christy Clark stepping down. There's nobody in the wings that was going to instantly take over the Liberals and be immediately electable as a new premier. So I think he looked at it and he made whatever calculations he had to make, and you could call it for the betterment of democracy or the betterment of his own bank account or whatever, and he decided, and take the perks and privileges that go with being a speaker, and he went for it. Now, I'm not going to question his motives or his decision to do so. That's a personal decision a politician makes, and I'm sure the party was disappointed in him, but people make all kinds of decisions in politics one day that are different from what they would have said or did say even a couple of weeks earlier.
Diane Watts, former mayor of Surrey, has made it clear she wants to run for the BC Liberal leadership. Is she an automatic front runner? Well,
I think she's a front runner. I don't know. I haven't paid a lot of attention to all of them yet. I'm waiting for them all to declare. I would watch Andrew Wilkinson and I would watch Todd Stone. I don't think Mike DeYoung, Mike DeYoung, he kind of has the senior, he has an edge, but I think he's too much identified with Christy Clark in the old school and that sort of thing. He's been around a long time, and that may be one of the problems with him. So I don't think he would. And don't forget, he put forward some of the budgets that are now very contentious, and I'm sure the NDP have lots of quotes that would show him to have said one thing, and then the facts came out when all of a sudden they had an extra $2 billion. I think DeYoung is weak. Watts offers. She offers a whole new, fresh look. She's not in the legislature. She's willing to give up being an MP to come back to BC. She apparently was very successful in Surrey. She was well liked. So, we'll see where that goes, but there's a lot of water to go under that bridge before they choose a leader.
Vancouver lost its community cable station owned by Chorus. Their promise they'll spend $10 million to improve local news coverage. Do you think that promise will be kept, or did they really pull the wool over the CRTC's eyes?
I think it's a little both. I think they probably will spend some money. They have to, make it look like they're doing something. They've done a few more of these community, well, they've always gone live with the news hour, various things. Now, of course, I've noticed going live, I think they went to, was it Kelowna or Kamloops or something once, but they used to go all over the province. Now they were doing things like Granville Island and North Vancouver, probably a little cheaper, in the community type series. But I haven't seen much that would, and that 10 million, of course, was, I believe, across Chorus, right across the country, because they got rid of several Shaw stations. So far, from what I've seen, I would have preferred to have kept the Shaw stations. I think they did much more valuable work representing the community, giving the community voice, giving community programming that if you were interested, you could actually tune in. Something as simple as watching city council meetings, and believe me, with several city councils across the country, that's the best thing you could have, is have it on TV, because people don't go and don't show up. And here we could see the Vancouver one. I think North Vancouver was on there for a while. And you could also see the Canadians' baseball games. I thought it was a terrific, terrific investment. And so far, what I've seen coming out of it on Global here, I would rather have kept Shaw Cable 4.
Harvey, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And good luck with future hurricanes in Florida.
I'll be keeping an eye.
My guest has been Harvey Oberfeld. Check out his blog, Keeping It Real, on harveyoberfeld.ca. If you have any questions for the show or our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.